Arun Bulchandani.
Yeah.
Good to see you, man.
Hey.
We've wanted to do this for quite a while, hey?
Yeah.
It's been cool. So it's been fun to see how everything panned out for us
Yeah.
to sit here. And thanks to the friends at 4B Media for this place.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to ask you some questions.
Let's do it, man.
Give me some background on your story. Where do you come from? What do you do? Who are you?
That's a good question. It's like, where do you start? I think the most relevant place to start is, I would say, back in 2007, around that time. So quite a while ago. I was studying to be a doctor. I was looking to fuse both fields, chiropractic, medicine. My dad, he's a retired physician. So he really inspired me in terms of getting to grips with his body. And, when I was in college, when I was studying, I had an awakening, and that opened up the spiritual world to my life. And I started to study, Christian mysticism, theology, travel the ancient world, just to make sense of reality, to see where we've come from as a race. And when we study where we've come from, it can help us to understand where we're going. And so the journey just continued to evolve. I continued to, pursue things in the body, but fuse it with Christology. And, during it all, I would encounter several health issues, which would set me back. It feels like set me back several years, time and time again. And obviously in the pain, it's not always easy to extract the glory or the gold from it. But it's there. And so I've just done my best to transmute some of that pain into solutions and wisdom for other people to optimize their mind, their body, and find deeper degrees of rest and mitigate stress, right? So in my body, a lot of people can attest to this themselves, is experiencing autoimmunity or self-attack or dis-ease or a war within. And so the war within manifested in an autoimmune condition, which is in a sense an inner war, an inner struggle. And I would find solutions and wisdom to get harmony within the spheres of my biology, not just my biology, but my psychology, my soul. And through navigating autoimmunity, having a condition, and I can get into it in a little bit, but having a condition that was very rare and obviously, like many doctors say, is incurable. We know that's not true.
What was the condition?
So this one I'm talking about, let's say it was alopecia universalis. And I have to say it like that. I have to say it was alopecia universalis because most people know about alopecia. I think it's pretty common. I think you have some people, famous people coming out and talking about the struggle with that. And basically it's hair loss. And it's not just like regular hair loss or male pattern baldness or whatever it is. It's a self-attack. It's an attack going on, which different people can manifest as different things, whether it's MS or Crohn's or, different things like that. So for me, it was alopecia universalis. When my body fell apart, I lost all the hair on my body, my eyebrows, my eyelashes, my nose hairs, right? So I have to say, you could see I have a beard right now. You can see I have eyebrows and eyelashes. I have body hair. It's still in process, but, yeah. So I was a hairy Indian and then I lost it all. But it wasn't just a superficial thing. Like autoimmunity, how it presented itself for me was it looked like it was very superficial with hair loss, but it's really a collapse of your inner world, of your inner energetic systems. And I went from being able to climb a mountain at a moment's notice, meaning like if somebody texted me and they're like, hey, you want to go hike Mount Shasta or something like that, I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. I went from being able to just do that to going to get the mail would be like, man, rough, be hard to do.
So you went through this season of pursuing understanding and knowledge and discovering your identity and just going full steam ahead in your life. And then at some point, was it a rapid shift or was it slow transition into this place where, as you're saying, contrast wise, you could climb a mountain and you could do all these high performance stuff, and then was it in 2 days, 2 weeks? How fast was the transition to not being able to?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes a lot of disease states are compounded stress over years and years and years. So I would have to say that was a factor. But there was an environmental trigger. There was a toxin introduced that I really feel like, boom, like hit the system really hard. And that was mercury amalgam, silver amalgam fillings in my mouth. So as a child, like most individuals, get some cavities, right? I don't think my kids will have them because I know how to do things differently. But I had some cavities and they filled them with mercury fillings, which I don't use as much anymore. But mercury is highly toxic. And the level that they were putting in the mouth to fill a cavity was pretty toxic. And over time, it's not like they just stay the same. It's not like they're just intact like they were when you initially got them. So maybe like how many years, like 15 plus years later, they're obviously degrading. And that is introducing toxins and mercury into the system ongoingly. But now they're like, they're fragile. And I remember feeling this crumble like in my mouth, like my tooth was crumbling. And I remember this metallic substance going down my throat. And I remember rushing to the bathroom to spit out whatever it was. And I realized, oh, that was a filling. And I'm like, man, I got to go to the dentist. I got to get over to the dentist. This is, I think, 2014. And when I got to the dentist, kind of like emergency visit, they didn't really pay any mind to it. They didn't have an understanding there. Mm-hmm. They weren't like a biological or integrative dentist. So he just drilled out the tooth, like right there. He just drilled out the rest of the silver fillings right there. And that introduced obviously a massive influx of even more. And within 2 weeks' time, I was starting to faint. Like I was starting to lose consciousness. I was starting to forget. Like
in 2 weeks after that.
In 2 weeks after that, I started to forget like the thing I was doing like right before. Like I would forget like, you know, where I was, you know, and I would then start fainting. I was working for a company at the time. I was, you know, top in the nation for what I was doing. And so I could get my quota in sales in an hour, you know, versus 8 hours. So my what is it called? My boss was like, hey, listen, just do what you got to do, you know? And I would just go in the car and pass out. You know, I would get my work done and just go pass out. And then I remember one day I just started to realize there was chunks of my hair was falling out. And then, okay, I just lost all the hair on my head. Okay, no big deal. I'm a dude. You know, I can sport the bald look.
Yeah.
I got my eyebrows. I didn't think they were going to go. And then within a few more weeks, I'm like, man, my eyebrows are thinning. My eyelashes are falling out. Well, I'm losing my body hair. But not just that. It wasn't just the hair, right? I was saying, I was losing all my energy. I was losing my clarity of mind. Couldn't remember things. I was like out of breath. I was exhausted. I was fatigued when I was walking to the mailbox. And so I started to, like, every system started to shut down. And then I took a medical leave from work to try and figure out what was going on. And that's when the shit hit the fan, so to speak. That's when I began to realize how conditional my self-love was. Basically, I began to realize how insecure I was. And so I thought I knew who I was. I thought I was strong. and don't get me wrong, I was, but I realized just how much my security, in a sense, was based upon my appearance. And we have to understand, the dimensions of the spirit and the soul. It's like we're more than just our body. And as you know, my work's a lot in the body temple. So I'm helping people embody Like I'm helping people get to grips with their physical body. But we're bigger than that as well. And that world was fractured. It was weak. And so I realized there was a lot of self-hatred. I realized I didn't quite love myself the way I thought I did. I was depressed. My appearance and losing my appearance and losing my energy obviously affects everyone, but it just rocked me.
So from what I know of you and understand, you were recently married as well.
So this is 2014.
2014.
So this is
okay.
this is the second crucible.
Okay.
The third one was the most recent one, which happened when I was married.
Okay. Yeah. And so you've had these fluctuations of, you have this drive to peak performance and understanding on how to optimize your body and use it and leverage it to bring results and achieve. And you're saying that in a matter of weeks you lost so much of your ability to do that, and the contrast was from almost superhuman performance training with all these amazing leaders in the world and being one of the top performers in your career, to not being able to do that. How did that affect you? Like you said, insecurity, and you started seeing layers of basically identity that you didn't know you didn't have.
Yeah.
Can you expand into that?
Yeah, my story is interesting because there's different chapters, and some of them seem like they're very much the same. And so some of the things you're saying, because you know my story pretty well, it's like that's a different saga. But when I lost everything, like my appearance, my energy, my career, also a relationship at that time, which I'm glad I lost because I met my wife later. When I lost all that, I had to go deep and I had to figure out who I was beyond the physical, right? I had to learn, hey, listen, I got to receive myself. I got to love myself unconditionally, just the way I am, even right now, and whatever imperfections I'm exhibiting, I've just got to love myself. And I realized that as I began to minister to myself, as I began to I love myself, right? As I speak to myself this reality, obviously I realized, yeah, God loves me. You know what I mean? I think everyone can attest, yeah, I know God loves me. And we see in the scriptures, it says, love God with all of your heart, all of your strength, all of your mind. Love one another as you love yourself. And so there can be a holdup if you really don't receive yourself or love yourself. On experiencing the love of God, on being able to love the people around you, it's kind of dependent on how you see yourself in a lot of ways.
So you're saying that unless that equation is full,
yeah, good way to say it. Yeah,
it can't be complete.
Yeah.
And so how did you experience that? Tell me more. That's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the love of God is complete, right? The thing is that our awareness of that could be incomplete based upon that equation. Yeah, if there's a discrepancy. So when I began to just sit with myself, and I had already went through all the stuff. I think a lot of people can attest to this. They went through all the stuff, meaning God loves me or whatever it may be, but maybe they haven't dealt with themselves. And have they dealt with themselves in the area of, do I love me? And maybe they haven't been tested in that way, right? Which I don't believe everyone needs to. Like my kids, I'm dealing with things in my genealogy that hopefully they won't have to deal with and be tested in, right? They'll be tested in their own ways, but hopefully not in the ways I've had to. Hopefully as a father and as a leader and as a pioneer, I can turn things off in my genetic line that won't be expressed in theirs, even spiritual children, yeah. So basically, learn to love yourself. And I know it sounds so cliche and almost sounds so fluffy, but it's not. It's authentic love. And this is what separates love from authentic love. It's if I just sit with myself and I say, hey, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. You're going to hear other voices come through. And those voices are the ones that are in opposition with what you just said. That's the inner dialogue that's really happening. Okay, so if I was in that position, I realized I had to minister to myself because I realized how much self-hatred, how much depression, how much discouragement, how much hopelessness, how much whatever. I measured myself based upon my measurements, my activity. If I realize that was going on, and then I sit with myself and I say, I love myself, there's going to be other voices that come up and try and oppose that statement, right? Because that isn't true, right? That's why I was sitting down and doing it, because it wasn't true to me, right?
I see.
Because back up, I was walking around in the same city I lived in, walking by the same people who would say, hey, Arun, good to see you. And they didn't recognize me. They didn't know who I was. Who's this person? I looked that different. But one of the reasons I looked so different was because I was so depressed that the eyes are the gateway to the soul. If you looked at my eyes, I was a different person, right? Because our inner world really shows who we are, right? Through our eyes, we understand that. You can see when somebody's very discouraged just by looking at their eyes, when they're very hopeless just by looking at their eyes. And when people looked at me in that state, obviously, like I said, I had no hair on my body, I had no eyebrows, no eyelashes. So when I saw people and they realized who I was, they're like, are you okay? Are you sick? Hey, do you have cancer? Is everything okay? Can I pray for you? Or whatever it is. And I mean, obviously that sucked. But fast forward back to, I love myself. I love myself. Really taking time to break through and find rest, find love, deal with those voices that were coming up. So I love myself. No, you don't. Right? So that's a voice. A lot of times we kind of have this fake positivity or we have this like declaration or whatever it is that kind of robs us of our expression because we're not willing to kind of deal with really what's underneath the hood. And so, because we think we're going the higher way by speaking something, a positive affirmation, which a lot of people are in bondage to affirmations. They're in bondage to their declarations. They're in bondage to positivity. They haven't been able to access their authenticity.
How does somebody get in bondage to positivity? What does that even mean?
Yeah. Okay, this is what it means. If I were to have sat there and say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, but I didn't weep through the other dialogue that was happening, like, no, you don't. You hate yourself. You're depressed. You're in a hopeless situation. You're not going to make it through this. You don't have what it takes. You failed before. You failed as a kid. You failed before. You're going to fail now. You see what I'm saying? The traumas kind of can come up, the things that happened in childhood or whatever it may be. You'll never amount to anything. Maybe that, one of my teachers told me that. I had a bunch of things happen like that. It's like, you'll never make it. It's like all these things start to come because you've experienced a setback. And so the thing is that I could just keep saying, I love myself through it. And I did. But the thing is I took time to sit with those traumas, to sit with those thoughts and feel them, right? And feel them and allow them to dissolve versus suppress them, bottle them up, and let them slowly eat away at my potential over time. So a lot of individuals, they haven't dealt with that inner dialogue. They may have said this affirmation, this declaration, and dismissed the trauma, dismissed what they really are feeling, what they're really thinking.
So you're saying we're replacing the truth of how we feel with pretending that, oh, I'm good, I can keep going, I can ignore this, I can suppress this.
Yeah. Yeah, like for instance, in the church, which I love the church, we oftentimes kind of like fake it till you make it, declare a thing, it'll be established. That's true, sure. Like declarations are important. Saying something that is positive is important, right? 100%. But we see that people are like, oh, like I'm healed. But inside, they don't feel that way. And then they kind of split and go a little crazy because they're healed, but yet they're a mess. God's okay with the mess. And it's actually embracing the mess that's going to result in the greatest healing.
That's really interesting. So it's this concept of being real and authentic before God, before yourself.
Yeah.
Can you go a little bit more of how was that in your life, that authenticity? How did that help you? How did you see it? How do you see it in other people? Because I know in my life, I would prefer not to be authentic with myself. It's easier to suppress and avoid things, and why be real?
Hmm. Yeah, because that's the real you, you know? That's why. It's like we're all trying to figure out who we are and become the fullest version of ourselves. Yeah, but the inner dialogue, what's happening, it's like that's what's really happening. That the message, what's speaking on the inside. And that's why, a lot of times people have a hard time slowing down and getting alone with their thoughts. And that's typically that place which is supposed to be a place of rest, can be a place of distress,
Mm.
right? But it's an invitation to deal with that and occupy that seat of rest, occupy that place of peace. But we got to deal with that stuff. And the thing is we've got somebody like, we've got Christ, he's overcome it all. The thing is that doesn't mean that we don't have our trials and our tribulations. Like one of the things he said is, listen, in this world you will see suffering. In this world you will see tribulation, but take courage because I've overcome the world, right?
Mm.
Okay, so he's overcome this world and I'll see suffering. I'll see tribulation. So we need to work through that,
Yeah, that's really interesting. So through tribulation and suffering, it kind of opened your eyes to the internal reality and the internal dialogue, because it just got amplified, as I understand. I know when things are hard for me in life, you're so much aware of dark thoughts and ideas and even dark memories in your life. So without authenticity, we can't actually turn and deal with them, and they're going to be there. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So kind of finishing off that chapter, that saga, I talked about, I had to receive myself. Like I realized just how much I was leaving on the table in terms of my potential. Right. And the thing is that the calamity, the distress, the suffering, the autoimmunity revealed an invitation into greater immunity, into greater harmony, to greater strength. Right. So that's what we need to see. We need to see that the tribulation is an invitation, right? Into manifestation, just like it's there. So I eventually saw that. And in hindsight, obviously you can see that the difficulties really, they really strengthened you. They really caused you to become who you're supposed to be. But in the midst of it, it's really difficult to see that. And that's why, I've talked about how can we suffer well, and suffering well doesn't mean suppression. It means actually allowing yourself to fully break down so that you can truly build back up.
What if you feel shame for suffering or sharing that with anybody? Like I know when I struggle, I'd rather just keep it to myself and not really open up, not really embrace that, not be authentic with myself, not be real with others. Like how do we process and deal with shame when we're going through stuff? How did you see that in your life?
I think it's really helpful. I think the disservice maybe that leaders have made is not being upfront about what they're going through. And I see that changing more and more in the landscape of our time now. I think all of humanity and civilization seeing the importance of authenticity. But I think a lot of times people don't feel okay about it. They feel the shame because for some reason they've been mesmerized to think that the person in front of them isn't going through it. Maybe they don't want to admit it, but why do they not want to admit it? We don't want to admit these things because we've been told that suffering, tribulation, difficulty is a form of weakness when it's actually a form of strength. So in our weakness, we see that God perfects his power. The thing is that we've been taught a lie. We've been deceived. So it's really that, what you're saying, it's really that inability to express ourselves we need to see as the bondage. because everyone around us is going through
Wow.
something. I was just speaking at, a seminar, and you were there, and I was talking about how, listen, like, it's good to be grateful. Like, we're in this studio right now. We're able to record something. There's people in the world right now that are being bombed. There's people, you know this really well, in the Ukraine. This is your heritage, and you know this really well, and you can speak to that in a minute. And there's just people going through it. And we're here right now. Like, we got clean water. We've got shelter. Yeah, we're in a really safe space. And so we can become grateful for that, and we should. Right? And everyone in the audience, when I was speaking about that, were like, yeah, like, we do have so much to be grateful for. And I go, that's true. And what's also true is that what you're going through, that you're finding to be difficult, is extremely valid. Despite what may be happening in that other country, the tribulation that you're experiencing in your own individual personal journey is valid, and don't suppress what you're going through because somebody's got it worse than you.
Wow.
So that's something. It's like, no, we can be thankful that what we have, but we've done that, and I've seen this happen at the expense, at our expense. Meaning, like, I've got stuff, man. I've got pent up stuff going on, and I'm just being told to be grateful. But the thing is that that's just suppressing it all. Right? And so we need to be able to be genuine, be real, be upfront, walk through our stuff. We've got our own journey. We don't want to diminish our sufferings, diminish the issues that we're experiencing in our life because of that. It should allow us to be able to generate more energy to transmute the things we're experiencing onto transformation. Like, the gratitude is there as a propellant, as fuel to be able to deal with this stuff, not to suppress it or to, like, disregard it. You see what I'm saying? And so I think we've been taught a way out. We've been taught a way out to actually transform.
Wow. And so your tribulation in the body kind of shifted the way you started perceiving the world and what you started pursuing in life, and you started understanding how the body works and the mechanics.
That's right.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know it's very rare to, like, really see somebody who is going after something with a purpose. You had a very spiritual background, and then through the spiritual dimensions in Christ, you kind of shifted your perspective on this body. And I know for a long time, for me, this body was just a vehicle to get me from here to the next stage, to the next level, right? And so I ignored my health, I ignored my diet, exercise, and often it's because we divide spirit and physical. And so, but you're coming at it from a perspective where it's not like that. It's not like that. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, and so what you're saying is, the spiritual dimension, definitely. And initially, I was studying human anatomy and physiology.
Okay,
and
so
then
you have a medical background.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I had that awakening, and so it was just like a fusion of both the metaphysics, and physiology, and Christ and Christology and human biology. So it came, and it didn't really, like, it was there, and I'd see those connections whenever, I'd read the scriptures, I'd read the Bible. Anytime I would see, like, oh, there's correlations between gratitude and authenticity and all of these things, and how to wield that 100%. And when I had that fall, like, we talked about already, the autoimmunity, and I lost everything, the story on how that ends and how it begins, starts a new beginning, is I began to do what I'm saying we need to do. I began to be authentic. I began to learn to love myself. I began to work through and walk through all of these emotions, all of these feelings with Christ. And it liberated me in such a deep degree, in such a large degree, that it was like a newfound energy came forth. It was like a greater energy than what I had before actually started to cascade over me. And so I began to understand just how important the realm of the soul and the unseen spaces were on my physical body and on my energy levels. It's like, I could see my thought life, and what it would do to my biomechanics and how I would move and how I would express myself physically. And so I realized, wow, this is the key. Like, obviously it is. We see that key: love God with all of your heart, strength, mind, love one another as you love yourself, right? It's the entirety of the law and the prophets. If we look at the Bible, it's like it's about love, not just love, but authentic love, right? And so when you begin to harness that, you begin to experience, like, you begin to connect with the 0 point. You begin to connect with the, the fullness of God in some sense, in a way, right? In a measure. You just like, you can feel through every pore of your skin. You can feel through every cell of your body almost, because there's no holdup, there's no restriction. Obviously, I'm just scratching the surface, so there is, but it's like a liberation happened to where you're like not just breathing, you're breathing through your whole being, spirit, soul, and body. And I felt like that love I began to experience it on a physical level, almost like food, almost like a coffee or whatever. It's like it was energizing me. And so that crucible opened up me sharing the work to like my story with the world and helping people. So I still didn't have any hair on my body. I still but I was like, I was shining. And, people would look at me and they'd be like, man, you look like a meta-human. You look like a superhero. Like, you see how it's in the eyes. Because as I begin to receive myself, love myself, I begin to experience my whole being. I begin to experience God in my body and through my eyes, and I would shine. I would almost become like this visible display of the glory of God in a small way, right? Because I began to receive myself for who God created me to be. And there wasn't any holdup, any trauma that was causing an inability for me to come through. Right?
Wow. So instead of trying to, through affirmations or scripture or through more exercise, kind of beat your body into submission, right? It's like this interesting view on authority that we've learned. You decided, well, you were made to learn to empathize and connect and be real and heal it and really understand it through the process of suffering and be there with it instead of running away or like trying to suppress it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it changed everything. And through that place, I found my mission, I found my calling, I found my unique expression like never before. And from that place, I met my wife. And it was incredible, And then I've went through my suffering, and that wasn't the first one. There was another one, and it kind of connects to this last and most recent one. But a year into marriage, some of the things I was doing and some of the people I was training with, I was like pushing the limits, and it wasn't necessarily from a place of it was from a place of just genuinely wanting to figure out, this potential that we have as humans. And we talk about beyond human potential, but we haven't even scratched the surface of human potential. And I had come out of a condition where I felt subhuman, right? I know a lot of people can relate with that. People are going through pain in their bodies, disease states. So I felt subhuman. And here I was like finally getting things back. And I caused an intentional remission, and I began to grow back my hair, and I began to do it through a place of in a sense, stress. So I used a hormetic stress, like cold exposure, to cause a kind of a shock or a reorientation of my immune system. And so my body was kind of shocked into a different pattern, and I began to get the hair back. And there's a lot more that goes along with that. But I was like, man, I got it. I finally got this. I got the victory. I was able to do something that doctors said I couldn't do. I had a very rare autoimmune condition, and there was damage to the hair follicles, all of it. So hair growth wasn't in the cards. Okay, so we shifted that narrative, and boom, it came back. And then sometimes it would go. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get this to remain? And I'm still on that journey, but I found some keys. And a year into our marriage, I realized I was addicted to topical steroids. So that's like cortisone. I was, as an infant, I was expressing eczema, right? Like a skin condition. Obviously, eczema is very well known. And it was bad, right? So I got put on topical steroids exogenously to calm the inflammation. Okay. As an infant, as a child, what typically happens if you begin to develop eczema, it's kind of like kids, their immune system's expressing itself and getting to know the world around them. So sometimes it gets agitated, sometimes it gets irritated. There's other factors too, diet, inoculations, so on and so forth, that can contribute to this. Since I was a C-section baby, it was a very traumatic thing. So that kind of changes the composition of the biome and the flora and all that stuff. And so there was so many factors that went into it, but the eczema was there. And the way we treated it and dealt with it was through stress. What is cortisone? What is the steroids, right? It's exogenous stress. Yeah. So we're using stress to bring rest. It doesn't really work that way. It's not really sustainable. But guess what? I was on that stuff for about 30 years of my life. Wow. So as an infant, we knocked it out. But what did I start to grow a dependency on? I started to grow a dependency on this exogenous substance, and my internal ability to regulate it was slowly fading away, right? And so I'm using this stuff all throughout my life. And a lot of things that come in your formative years of development, it just becomes a pattern and a cycle and something you do. You don't really think anything of it. It just began like it's like a toiletry in your toiletry bag. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's my ointment. Yeah. So I sometimes I wouldn't need it, but most of my life I needed it. And there was a time it got really bad, and this is before I lost my hair. It got really bad. I was living in New Zealand, and so I didn't have access to it. So I was just trying to do it naturally. And that's when I kind of maybe first was starting to understand, wow, like I actually have to use this stuff. At one point I began to realize after all the other things weren't working that I needed to get a prescription and use some of this stuff. And even that started to not work that well. And so I was I was confused. I made my way back to the US and where I'm from, and I couldn't shake it. Like it was just, my skin was just horrendous, man. It was just terrible, like so much pain. And it's like my skin organ didn't work as one with my body. It was just, it was constantly dry, constantly irritated, constantly itchy. And I would have to just lather like coconut oils and different things on my skin to try and stay hot, keep it moisturized. What I didn't realize is that I was in a drug withdrawal.
Wow.
My body was dependent on this drug, and I wasn't giving it to it. And so it was, what a drug withdrawal does. It was crying out for it. It needed its fix. And so eventually I didn't quite know that was going on. And so I went to the dermatologist, and he's like, hey, listen, very simple. I've got something for you. It should knock it out pretty soon. Go ahead and use this. More potent. He didn't say that. Go ahead and use this one, and it'll knock it out maybe 3 weeks. And then go ahead, if it comes back, just keep using it, whatever. So I used it. All right. In 3 weeks, I felt like I had my life back. I was just fully functional again. I'm like, this is a miracle. And I got prayers from people who work miracles, before it didn't work. And so here I got this stuff. I'm like, cool. Like this is how God's working, like through this thing. And I felt like I got my life back. But then it was 9 or 10 months later where I had that silver filling break, and I lost all my hair. What I didn't realize is how much that also contributed to it.
Okay.
Because there's another toxin in the system. Because the interesting story I'm weaving together. So 3.5 years ago, okay, I'd already went through the hair loss. I already found my confidence again. I found my love again. And I'd already been through the skin thing. So here I went through like 2-3 year, obviously the skin thing was my whole life, but I went through some severe trials already in my body. I'm on the other side finally. And, I'm just trying to figure out, how do I get this immune system harmonized? Right. And I ended up, connecting with people like the Iceman, Wim Hof, and trained with him one-on-one. And I figured out how to get connected with my breath even more. And I figured out how to cause an intentional remission in my autoimmune condition and get my hair back and get my body online. But I had to use this stressor. I had to use this activity, this hormetic stress. It wasn't from a place of rest. And then I wanted to figure out, and I had to figure out, how can I do this from rest? Because when I realized, a year into marriage, that I was addicted to an ultra potent topical steroid. Now that steroid that they put me on when the other ones weren't working, when nothing was working, was called something. It was called clobetasol propionate. Okay, it's 600 times more potent than hydrocortisone. So it's like crazy. And so I was putting this on my skin almost every day, and I use it for 7 years. You're not supposed to use it more than 2 weeks.
7 years,
Yeah.
600 times more potent.
Yeah. So I was using it because I would use it and it would go away. But because it's a drug addiction, 2 weeks again would pass and it would start to erupt. That wasn't eczema, my friends. That was a drug addiction.
Wow.
And so I eventually realized it, and I was doing all these things for my health and helping people. And I'm like, whoa, I got to kick this. Because when I lost all the hair on my body and I had the autoimmune condition, when I was broken and I was depressed, I looked, what could I do? And I found a Stanford research trial on a drug called Xeljanz, which is an immunosuppressant. And I got into that research trial and I got shipped, eventually 3 months later, I got on it. I got in the research trial and they shipped me the immunosuppressant. And by that 3 months, I had already done that love stuff. I had already begun to receive myself, build my confidence up. So when I got it in the mail, I was like, I remember the state of mind and body I was in when I reached out to see if I could find a solution, and I was okay with suppressing my immune system to get my body back. Now I'm not okay with that.
Okay.
And so it was like $3,000 a bottle. Okay. And I'm like, and I got it for free because I got accepted in the research trial because my condition was bad enough to be utilized as a study. Okay. So a case study. So I saw that drug and I'm like, I can't do this. I was like, I can't suppress my immune system. I need to figure out how to harmonize my immune system. And so that's when I got on that journey. And I began to figure it out. Okay, I began to figure out how to tap into the autonomic nervous system, how to regulate the immune system. But again, it was through stress. And so a year into marriage, I said this already several times, I said, I'm done. I'm done with the steroids. I can't believe this. I can't believe this has been going on for 33 years of my life. How much of my potential was squandered with this stuff? Because I realized a lot of my childhood issues, whether it was my childhood insomnia all the way to adult life, a lot of this stuff was because I was putting exogenous hormones on my body, cortisol. Now, cortisol, what do we know about cortisol? It's fine. It's part of our HPA axis. It's part of our physiology. It's great. It has a function, but it's a stress hormone. And so one of the reasons we are able to fall asleep is because it starts to go down as we're about to go to sleep. And then one of the reasons we wake up is because cortisol and stress hormones wake us up in the morning, right? So here I am. I'm like, I realized why I couldn't sleep like other normal kids. Different things like that. There's so much that goes into it. The nightmares, all these things. Anyways, it's like a big topic. So I was realizing I gotta end my connection with this stuff and find another way. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. And so, you knew me then. And so I was doing a lot of training. I was doing a lot of stuff, taking some incredible ground. And so I was like, yeah, listen, I'll be able to, because I had heard for every year you have used this, it's a month. So I'm like, okay, it's a 3-year recovery road for me. 3 years, flip, no, I'll do it in 3 months. Yeah. That was how ambitious and how much I believed in my ability to overcome this. 3 months passed, and I actually thought I did it because I had like it kind of lifted a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, I got this. Like, and then it got worse.
Mm.
And it got way worse. And I began to not be able to get out of bed without my skin tearing.
Mm.
Like I looked like almost like a leper. My whole skin from like my head to my toes were just completely cracked, torn open. It was brutal to look at. And it's like, here I am, my first year of marriage, and my wife's like, what is going on? Like, you know? And I'm like, yeah, babe, I'll make it through this. 6 months go by. Okay, I'm gonna crack through. I'll definitely do this. I'll definitely do this in 9 months. 9 months go by. Okay, I'll definitely get this done before a year. A year goes by. It's worse in the second year than it was in the first year. Then it lifts. And I'm like, finally, I made it through.
Mm.
Then it gets worse than it ever has. It was like a
Worse.
mind-body trip because the healing from this condition isn't linear. It's not like, oh, you steadily get better. It's like, oh, you get better, you feel like you're good, and then you spirals, and then you're down. And it's like this crazy thing. And the leading physician in the area of topical steroid withdrawal, red skin syndrome, is like, listen, it's about a 3 to 5 year journey. It's hell. He's like, just don't take your life. You know, that's pretty much what it is. And because it just, you can't sleep, you can't sleep, you can't focus, you can't function. It's like it robs you almost of everything. You feel so like, you feel trapped, right? So you just but you know what? I was like, okay, hey, listen, I'm trapped in this body. I got to get to know it more.
Mm.
I'm like, when I felt strong, these are the types of things I would say. When I felt weak, I'm like, all right, God, like you can take me. Let's like, I'm good. Is my wife going to be okay? Then I'll just take off. Like I can't live in this body.
Mm.
So again, it's like, I'm not some strong, like I can overcome anything kind of dude. Like I got depressed. My mind broke because of the pain in my body. I got very hopeless. I got into deep despair. But I owned that.
Mm.
And I talked with God about it, with my wife, with my friends, with people that were leaders in my life, everything. I'm like, this is what's going on. I just owned it. I just decided that I wasn't going to be strong, that I was just going to be real. And I think that's different. It's like we want to be strong, but I think the greater than strength is real. Like, can I be real? And so I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be anything besides me in what I'm experiencing. And that, I think, changed everything for me in my spiritual life and my soul life, because finally, I'm being the real me.
Mm.
It was demanded of me.
Mm.
That or just be some fake, false strength thing and be some motivational speaker that never dealt with their shit. Like, we have a lot of those. And it's like, come on, man. Like,
So
Yeah.
help me understand with like you've gone through so much. Where do you see yourself going now? You've learned so much, so many keys for transformation and tools. Where do you see yourself going? What are the desires of your heart now?
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to get harmony in my immune system because I felt like if I could get peace, shalom in my body, and because I was demanded of me in a sense to do it through a process and wisdom, that I could help a lot of people. Because statistically, there's a massive amount of people going through autoimmunity, and obviously various conditions, both mental and physical, anxiety, all of this stuff. And so if I could get a handle on this and I could get wisdom to do it, then I could help a ton of people. And that's where I'm headed. Like I'm here to help people understand the integration of spirit, soul, and body, not just the soul, not just dealing with trauma, but understanding that the body is extremely important, understanding that the spirit is important, understanding that the greatest foundation for life is Christ, understanding that this is all an integrative approach, a holistic approach to health. It's like we can't discount the spirit, we can't discount the soul, we can't discount the body. Who is the author and originator and creator of it all? Okay, that's the fulcrum foundation for life. How do we take care of our health? How do we understand our connection with creation, nutrition, metabolism? How does that correlate with mysticism? How does all of this connect with cognition? So I'm just trying to connect all the spheres, connect everything, because it's all connected anyways. So we got to look at it as a unified field. We got to look at it as we have to have a unified approach to life. And so with me having gone through the skin disease, having gone through the autoimmunity, eventually I discovered how to do this in rest.
Hmm.
And I believe like, yeah, people can live in stress states. People can live off that. People can do a bunch of things, right? Which it's good to steward your body, but people can, and I do that, but people can do all of this stuff, this hormetic stress to create change, but can we find rest, right? Can we find abundant life? Can we enter into God's rest, in a sense, even enter into rest in our bodies? And I think that's the thing. And so for me, my wife said, listen, remember, Arun, because like sometimes I question everything I do. And I think like that's okay and that's healthy because we're trying to figure out who we are. And I'm like, babe, I don't know if what I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. She goes, remember, like it's like you're the living testimony of what you're speaking about. She's like, you aren't just saying something. You've had to do, and you've had to go through the hell in a sense to create the heaven that you're starting to experience, right? And you see like, okay, this is somebody might be listening to this audio, but on video you'll see, hey, listen, he's okay, yeah, he's got a beard, he's got eyebrows, eyelashes. If I actually let the hair on my head grow out, I would kind of look like older because I have got male pattern baldness. But the fact that I can say that I've went from alopecia totalis or universalis, follicular damage, to male pattern baldness is like, that's pretty crazy. And so one of my next things is reversing male pattern baldness without weird drugs. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that'll happen, I think. But the thing is that I've done this through nourishing my body. I've done this through finding ways to deal therapeutically with my structure and function, increasing energy, not stress, but achieving a calm, energized state. And so when I begin to shift my energetic body, so to speak, and I'm not talking about some esoteric thing, although that's there as well. We can't discount our mystical nature. But what I'm talking about is, our biological energy. When I begin to increase the energy in my body, not from a place of stress, but from a place of rest, my immune system began to harmonize and my hair started to come back and my skin started to regenerate. Now I'm still in the journey there, but I've come a long way and done quite a few things, and I've helped others do the same thing in their body. And it's just the beginning. So I think, again, to answer your question, my life is about union with God. Like the greatest thing I think that we can ever achieve, and we'd actually be wrong if we consider it an achievement. It's a state of being. So the greatest thing I could ever do is understand and become aware of my union with the divine. Okay. And then from that place, the divine architect who created me, how can I now achieve or rest into or flow into full potential in my physical body, in my mind, all of it, and in creation, in my calling, in my purpose. So I think that's it. So how can I have genuine friendship, connection with God, with one another, with myself? Again, the whole thing is love God with all of your heart, all of your strength, all of your mind. Love one another as you love yourself. So how can I live that template? What does that look like for me? Sometimes it looks like living a very simple, peaceful life, on our small farm. I don't need to do anything else. All I need to do is what's in my heart. You know what I mean? And we kind of need to detach from all the societal things, like even all the stuff, like the performance-based spirituality. It's like, it's like genuine connection with God, genuine love for one another that comes from actually a love for yourself too. And then what does it look like for you? Like, what does it look like for you to walk into your full potential? That's what matters. And so that's what I'm like, and obviously like with you, it's like I want the people I'm get to impact, which I consider a privilege. I don't consider it as a right to like speak or do the things I do. I'm always like, wow, I can't believe people want to learn from me, and not from a place of insecurity, not from a place of considering myself less than, because then I wouldn't have done the work that I'm talking about that I have done. Like, I know who I am,
Mm.
but also it's like it's humbling. Like, I've been broken. Like, I've been very weak. I'm still very weak, but I do understand that my weakness actually created something greater than strength. It created like a realness, like this whole, without saying it so many times, this authentic factor. And so if I can connect with that, with everything I just said, and help others connect with that reality, then man, that's God's work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's it, man. Like, Jesus said, hey, listen, my food is doing God's work, is doing the will of my Father. And so what's that for you, the person listening, the person watching? Like, what is that truly for you? Like, yeah, and I think we just need to figure out how to touch base with that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You touched on a bunch of different topics within that place of creating rest in a place where your body was at war. Your body was at war, your mind was at war, and you intentionally, through nutrition, learned how to put your mind and body and give it the power to go through the process of suffering. And you learned how to rewire your thinking to suffer well and understand and not try to escape it, but embrace it and be transformed by it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Could you speak a little bit more into that, of suffering well, understanding? Because I know in my life that's something that's helped me a lot. Well, obviously when the war started in Ukraine, it was really difficult with my mind, of like all these thoughts, all these fears. But it's this approach of do the best you can with what you have. Like, what is that? Yeah.
Spend a minute on that with your.
It's fascinating
experience.
to me to learn how to, in a way, embrace the present and the current reality of what's happening. Like, be real and authentic, not try to escape it, not try to change it, and from that place come and see, okay, this is what I desire. I desire to live. You wanted to live. You were newly married. You were living on a farm. You couldn't do much, right? But you looked at, okay, what do I have? I can nourish this body. I can connect with friends. Through my suffering, I can actually encourage people who are suffering in similar or other areas in life to learn how to transmute suffering onto gold, how to pull the gold out of suffering. And yeah, I'd love you to unpack that a little bit more, because I feel like through my hard seasons, you've helped me to do that, but it's still semi-unconscious for me. I'm like, well, I've learned that, but it's not active in a way.
Yeah.
We had a little technical.
Yeah, we had a little glitch.
Help me understand of how the process of suffering.
Yeah.
And how you have used that to extract gold.
Right.
Because I feel like you've discovered a timeless principle, a virtue, so to speak, that could be applied to us who are going through stuff in different ways. But it's a key. It's a way to find things. It's a way of living. It's not just a tactic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on, man. I think we see all throughout history. I think it's helpful to just see that almost, I mean, every single person who has become anything has had to transmute their sufferings unto righteousness, unto their calling, unto glory. And so that also helps. It also helps to understand that it's a part of life. Although we want to minimize some various aspects of suffering for the people around us, like for instance, our children, right? Like I want our children to have a different nutritive lifestyle so that maybe they'll be able to perform better, right? So I can minimize some of the sufferings that we don't need to have, you know, in the food system and so on and so forth, so that they could perform better. Or, yeah, just with even keeping, you know, our home as a temple, like keeping it clean, keeping it non-toxic. That's going to be better for them. They're not going to be experiencing glitches, right, in their mind because of toxins floating through the atmosphere. So it's like we can minimize suffering, right, for individuals. Now, the things like that but the thing is that the things that we've experienced, anything that has come and tried to oppose us, we can see it as an invitation, right? And we can see it as an initiation into greater degrees of transformation. I know it just sounds like good words, but what I'm trying to say is like, it's just important to be a victor versus a victim. And so now it's okay to be a victim and become aware that you need to become a victor. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm not saying is that you need to be strong. What I am saying is you need to be real. Again, coming back to that reality, is that saying be strong is saying be a victor and stop being a victim.
Yeah.
Being real is saying, hey, listen, this sucks. You've been through a lot. What you're going through, it's not okay. But guess what? You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And help yourself and help one another, like help speak that to yourself, because that's actually what's going to cause you to rest through versus breakthrough is being real. Breakthrough is like force, strength, right? And I've got nothing wrong with having strength, you know, like I love that. But not at the expense of being raw, being real, being authentic. So again, maybe you're on this on your own. Don't be. You know, some of you don't have family that you're connected with. Maybe you have a friend, but you have God. Community is important, but sometimes that takes time to develop. All right. The thing is, during what I was going through, I had my wife, I had family, I had support, I had friends. I had a lot of people in my life. I'm very fortunate in that regard. Was I very intentional on building those structures? Yeah, for years. I was very intentional on building structures of connection in my life. It didn't come natural to me. That's another topic. But I did take time to build those things because I know I can't do it on my own, right? The thing is that there were times in my life where I was on my own, or I felt like I was on my own, okay? So I've been there as well, all right? And those times, you've got God, all right? So lean into that and process your sufferings, process your cares. You know, there's this incredible scripture, and I talk about it all the time because it's really helped me. And we see the Apostle Paul, okay, in scripture, in the Bible. All right, I can give context for his life a little bit, but let's just say this. Let's just say he was experiencing tremendous opposition in his life. He was left for dead, right, on numerous occasions. And he says, I've learned to be content in all situations, okay? Whoa. Okay, if you look deeper, it says, I've discovered the secret of overcoming all things. Another one says, I was trained in the secret of shalom, right? So he learned this space of peace, this space of overcoming, right? And then we kind of look at another verse in Philippians, and he's saying, be thankful in all things, right? He said, cast your cares upon the Lord, meaning like connect with God. Befriend God. Cast your cares upon him, meaning be real, like process your emotion, process your pain with God, and be thankful. You see, he's not saying be thankful, you're going to be all right. You know, be positive. No, because that never works. Never works, right? He's saying be real before God. You have so much to be grateful for, right? Because you're living, you're held together by his love, by his word. All right? But be real. Express your pain. And it's from that place of authenticity that the true peace of God that surpasses all understanding can garrison your heart, can lift up your heart, can lift you up, right? It's therapy into Christ Jesus. So we got to understand, like, man, it's just like, it's being real that's going to allow us to rest, because we're being true to who we are. We're being true to our life experience. We're being true to the pain that we're experiencing, all of it. So that's true. That's being a true victor. You know, a victor, like being victorious isn't disregarding the pain. Not at all. You know, we may do that to protect ourselves, right? Because we can't process it at this current time. That's okay. There's a lot of people who are watching who've experienced significant trauma in their life, and they're not ready. Just like they're not ready to process it. Okay. And so that's fine. Like there'll come a time in your journey where you're ready, where there's a safety to being able to do this. Okay. So I get that. And kind of backing up again, it's like when I was going through the sufferings, I had my wife, and I was able to break down in her arms. She's a pillar of peace, right? And that was awesome. But there were times where what I was going through, it's like, man, she would be like, I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. You know, and she would cry with me. And it's really there that it's like, you know, you have God. Okay. And you truly can understand, right? The reason why Jesus was sent was really to also understand the human condition, so we would know that God could resonate with us in our weaknesses. You know, we could find likeness in God through the person of Christ, and realize that through the gospel, through his overcoming, we've also overcome in him. He took us with him into victory. That's life-changing, okay? That's a revelation. So suffering well is, again, it's so interesting because it seems like it's just common sense, but sometimes it's become uncommon sense. You know, we've just become so distant from who we are. And I can speak about this in so many ways. And it's like, for instance, you know, for me to suffer well, I also had to kind of get connected to old times. And we talk about the food system. I had to figure out, oh yeah, like what actually works with human biology? What kind of foods actually bring rest into the body? And then also, like we've distanced ourselves from the earth. And we really understand now through numerous scans that contact with creation, contact with the earth, contact with nature mitigates a lot of the hyper-inflammatory states. So we see in old times, right, there's a lot more contact with creation, and that mitigated a lot of stress. And so right now in society, a lot of people are disconnected from nature. Now, before this happened to me, I was doing a lot of that already, okay? But these are things that just compound to help us suffer well. Like the earth can actually be a therapeutic agent to help us get through our struggles, right? Like the earth takes away our physiological cares. It really takes out our cares, you know, our inflammation, brings it into the earth. That's what it says. Like, okay, we know that grounding or earthing decreases inflammation. That's established. That's amazing. So if we need to partner with creation, and that's actually partnering with God, because God established and created the natural order, the natural world, and he's put elixirs, he's put therapies in there that help us overcome. So it's like it's like multidimensional, right? There's so many angles on overcoming and on being well.
Fascinating. So what I'm hearing you say, help me understand if this is what you mean, that when you're suffering, you're feeling pain, you're feeling dis-ease, right? Whether it's physical or emotional. And the reason you need to be real and authentic is to connect in that place, to bring awareness and life into that. And that not just run away, but to deeply connect and understand, to be able to bring life intentionally into that place. So in your circumstance, you are hypersensitive to stressors and inflammation. So you need to learn how to exclude them and push them away, and then how to intentionally nourish your body to purposefully put it into rest and help it to go into rest because it was at war within itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. And it's like I'm when we're talking about this, I can come at it, again from so many angles. It's like, okay, hey, listen, you're in severe pain. You're under massive amounts of stress because of the pain, because of the disease state, because of all of what it does. Like, for instance, it takes away your vitality and it takes away your calling, it seems. But then what you have to understand is, like, in that space, look into it, feel into it, because you can take whatever you're experiencing and eventually cause it to work in your favor. Because everyone's is facing opposition, and they're looking for solutions. They're looking for ways to combat these states, right? The thing is it's those states that cause us to typically transform, right? And so what you're going through, like what I'm going through, say I've had to navigate alopecia universalis and topical steroid withdrawal and eczema, and then also depression. Also, you see like through this talk, you can see how unique that is. Okay. And so that's going to speak to somebody. It's going to likely speak to a lot of people, because people who are listening to this who may have found this because they're going through alopecia, they're going through skin disease, maybe they're just going through difficult things and they have a walk with God, whatever it may be. It's like, wow, I'm hoping you guys, it kind of, a light bulb goes off. It's like, oh man, like, oh, these things I'm going through, although it's crushing me, can help somebody else. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm very aware, like, okay, hey, listen, man, the dark side's gonna be sorry, man. Like, I'm gonna, like, cause I'm gonna help so many people. The people, there's a lot of people who are very hopeless that are going through what I've went through, and I'm gonna bring them solutions. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna bring them unique perspectives and methodologies, and I'm gonna help them to rest and obtain victory and authenticity through their trials. You see, so anybody's listening to this, like, think about that for you. Like, how have you navigated these things, and how can you help somebody else do the same? That's healing the world, right? And so you got to see it like that. I did see it like that, but then sometimes things will get really bad and you get crushed again and you get hopeless. And that's where it's like somebody, like, they can tell you it's going to be okay and all of that stuff. You just kind of have to take it step by step and just, like, I'm going to make it on the other side of this. Okay, maybe I won't. And that's where it's authentic. It's like, man, maybe I won't. Because you see that I'm going to make it on the other side of this. You see that it's like, am I? And it's in that doubt. It's actually in that question that you find, I feel, the ability to rest through that situation, right? And there's things that's like, when I was zapped, I looked at what I could do. Like, oh yeah, I found out that I was hypothyroid. Okay. And so then I realized, well, hypothyroidism, that means I don't have enough energy on hand, on deck to deal with said condition. And so I was like, okay, hey, because I have a background in physiology, I understand biochemistry and things like that. You can actually work with a practitioner on this and everything like that. So it's like, man, how can I address temporarily this hypothyroid state that is brought on by stress and pain? So I began to supplement with things that would increase thyroid production. And that would give me more energy, right? To deal and help regenerate, but also to uplift the mind. So you say there's so many ways and angles we can come at this. God has put so many things that we have and we can align with, right? And so it's not just all the mental, it's not just all the, the physical. Like I got in deeply into breath, and I began to understand and study respiration with the best of them, and how I can change the pattern of my breath to cause immunomodulation and harmony within my body. Okay, so that's one thing. That's amazing.
So you're going in a really cool direction. So you were in a state of suffering that included a bunch of things, and so you started understanding how what were the pillars, or what were the doorways, or like wheels that were driving that vehicle. So breath, nutrition, thyroid. Can you give us a quick rundown of from me not having any medical or physiological understanding a little bit, but what are the pillars you were intentionally focusing on to bring yourself out of a state? Or if somebody's in a state that is maybe not as extreme but still wants to learn how to be intentional about health and looking after the temple, what are those pillars?
Yeah, that's good. I think first things first, it's like, we can utilize things like nutrition to stabilize. God put so much in the foods that can cause regeneration.
So like going on a diet.
Yeah, well, stewarding your body through whole foods, right? And I'm not going to direct like, hey, these things, whatever. But like, for instance, like if my skin organ is compromised, then what's going to help rebuild that structure? Well, gelatinous meats like are going to be really helpful, because you got the bone collagen, and you got the nutrients within this the animal that directly are compatible with your body's skin and your body's makeup. So it's like you can take things in that can help bring stability and regeneration to that, and you can begin to like, this is interesting. You can begin to decrease bad fats and bad oils so that you can digest and assimilate things like sugars, which are the nutrients of abundance. We have carbohydrates. They actually help you establish rest in your body, and they actually directly connect with thyroid production, right? So if you aren't able to metabolize sweetness that well, then your thyroid doesn't really have the constituents and the substrates to work with to generate, energy in the body, to convert T4 to T3, active thyroid hormone, and all that. So there's a lot in our food system that has caused us to be misaligned. And so we can utilize nutrition to further align and then heal your digestion. Like if you can get your digestion in place and your nutrition in place, man, you've done incredible work, especially in our time. And now moving from there, it's like you can look at the water. Are you drinking water that's living, structured water, like the water in your body? So you can see like, oh man, I think I should pay attention to the water I'm drinking sometimes. I should pay attention, obviously, the food I'm eating. Have fun. Don't get like, I see it all the time. It's just people they just get in this fear-based space, right? To where it's like, man, they're just completely governed by food. They're not able to have fun without being so tremendously fearful about the world around them. But I get that, because I get what it's like to be so sensitive to foods and have an allergenic response to so many things. So it can cause that. But the thing is, you can repair that and have a little bit more freedom to be able to explore foods. The thing is sometimes we need to dial that in so we can harmonize the immune system. That's why, and this is old news, like people who have done all types of diets to get stability with their condition. Okay. And so that's there, okay? And then there's supplementation, and some supplements can be very toxic, okay? But there's some things that can be very helpful. And so I think it's just dialing that in. For me, getting, I believe, this is kind of an interesting take on this, but I believe autoimmunity, yeah, sure, there's an attack within, but I believe that it's also because of a lapse in energy. And so when energy is blocked, the bodily processes are basically in flux. They're not able to establish the right rhythm in a sense. Okay. So when you can increase energy in the body, and I'm not talking about like manic energy, I'm talking about calm energy. When you can increase energy in the body, the immune system can stabilize and harmonize, and the body could be set in right motion, you know? So this is like an interesting topic because, you know, a lot of people are focusing on gut health, rightfully so. We need to focus on gut health. But one of the things that modulates our ability to have a integrous intestinal ecology and digestive process is the thyroid gland, right? It's like the energy conductor of the body. And so when that isn't there, it's kind of hard to get good gut health. So every system in the body works in tandem, and yeah, that's a little bit.
What are some of the systems within the body that you use to kind of fine tune yourself into rest?
Yeah, you know, everything, you know, from the breath, right? One thing I do want to kind of just emphasize again is like I was in a lot of pain, and I oftentimes couldn't focus, right? And so I had to like just be and exist in God in a lot of ways, and just because I was at the end of myself. And I know a lot of people who've been in that place. It's like, man, I don't have energy to do anything. Well, chances are you're going to have a meal that day. You know, chances are you're going to take a breath. Obviously, like you're breathing all the time. Okay. This is a process of the autonomic nervous system that you can tune into, and you can elongate your inhale and you can elongate your exhale. You can find your own rhythm of making your breath a little bit more integrous, and therefore you can occupy a more parasympathetic rest and relaxed state. In pain, anyone who's been in it, anyone who's tweaked their back, or anyone who's obviously been in chronic pain will notice that your breath is way more shallow, right? Because you're in a stress state, and you're in a almost kind of a chronic panic state, and your breath can be very like just surface and shallow. So I noticed that because anytime my condition would flare, my breath would get more shallow. But because I was trained in all of these things and certified in all these things regarding respiration, I was like, oh, I see what's happening here. I'm going to actually do the opposite. I'm going to elongate my inhale and my exhale. And what would that do? That would, in part, take me out of that fight or flight, stress, pain state. Like maybe I'd still be in pain, but I would take one of the systems in my body that was affected by that pain, and I would intentionally bring it into rest, and therefore I would have an impact on that pain. So you see, that's just the breath. Now, when you're in a stress state, oftentimes you're burning through a lot of sugars. And some people will tell that person to stay away from sugar. The thing is that you're burning through that under chronic stress. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it's that sweetness that brings rest in the body. Mm-hmm. Sure, you may have an allergy to some things, kind of follow your body, develop self-awareness. The greatest thing I teach, I think, like I teach a bunch of guidance in all of these areas: nutrition, digestion, supplementation, all this stuff. I do that one-to-one with people. I do that in groups. One of the great things I'm trying to help people establish is self-awareness, intuitive process, introspection. Like I want people to really get in touch with how things affect them so that they can develop their own game plan to optimize their life. Okay, so for me, what I would do, and I've talked about this in one of my newsletters, is, you know, when I was shouldering so much pain and in a state of stress, I knew, just because of what I know, I knew that I was burning through so much of my resources, so much fuel. So what I would do is I would eat things that were nutritious, right? That were not inflammatory for me. I would eat things that would contribute in advance. You know how sometimes you'll wait to eat a meal?
Yeah.
So I would eat to ensure that I could buffer against said stress that was coming, and that I wouldn't be in a state where my body was depleted when that would happen.
Oh, wow.
So I would make sure I buffered against that upcoming stress. A lot of people are like, man, they kind of wait, and they go into a meeting or they're in some type of thing, and then they're just riding on stress hormones. But you can actually put your body into a state of rest, or you can actually be in a level place. I know some people like to work in a more adrenaline cortisol state to get things done. A lot of people I know and work with do that. I'm trying to say like, hey, listen, I get it. Like you can work with that. But when we look at anti-aging and all that, we do want to figure out how to operate from rest, not stress physiology. And so for me, in managing pain and regenerating my body, what do you want to do? You want to deal therapeutically with your structure and function. You want to nourish your body. I mean, nourish your body through your breath, through the food that you're eating, through your movement, through your connection with creation, through potential medication that's righteous, because there are those out there that can really help a lot of people harmonize their immune system while they're spending a few years dialing in nutrition. Because a lot of people, they'll present with an autoimmune condition or an issue in their health, and it took them 20, 30, 40 years to get there. Okay. And then they start making changes in their diet and everything like that. And that's amazing. That's what you need to do. And it could take several years. So what's something maybe that you can incorporate into your life, a righteous medication that can help you as you're stabilizing your body through best practices and lifestyle habits, all of that, right? Obviously, the neurobiology of sleep is important. So like I had to figure out my neurobiology of sleep. How do I rest? How can I, because I spent mostly sleepless nights the last 3.5 years because of the condition triggers the most at night. So how can I, despite what I'm going through, utilize nutrition, utilize things to cause me to be able to fall asleep, stay asleep, and regenerate? These are all things, right? It can go into breathing tactics, so you can breathe more integrally during the night, whether that's mouth tape or whatever, fixing your nasal breathing. It can be, and I'm still on that journey, and it could be, hey, maybe you need to keep a glass of orange juice on your nightstand with some salt in it. And because a lot of times people are waking up in the middle of the night in a stressed state because they burn through their glucose, they burn through their sugar stores, which is the nutrient of abundance, the nutrient of rest. It's what allows them to stay, in a sense, in a deep sleep. Because the stress hormones, when you begin to deplete the sugar stores, they begin to rise, and that's kind of what wakes you up, right? So a lot of people want to kind of extend that. They want to extend that stress state, and they eat later on in the day, right? And if you want to do that, but know what you're doing. What you're doing is you're leveraging stress physiology, which is pro-aging, right? To get through the day. Now, maybe that's better than the inflammatory foods you might be eating, you see? So it's never cut and dry. There's so many influencers out there that want to say this one thing or this too, but it's always very nuanced. It's like this, it's a spectrum, right? I did cold exposure for a lot of my journey, and I experienced so much beauty in what the cold did, what it did to my mind, what it did to my breath. A lot of us are bombarded by thoughts, right? But you get into that cold body of water, and I prefer nature because you're grounded and you're in the earth's field. And all of a sudden, all the distractions just fall away, and you're single-minded, just you and your breath, and you just follow it, and you actually get into a place where you're breathing deeply and you're finding rest within something like the cold. So you're developing resilience, right? That was amazing. Now, when I began to present with hypothyroidism, which means I couldn't keep my body temperature, I couldn't stay warm, then that practice was working against me.
That
you
makes
see?
sense.
And so for some people, it's like, it's not a one size, it's not like, and we typically, our presentation and our physiology it just shifts on sometimes a day-to-day, weekly, monthly basis. So sometimes people are trying to do something that worked for them last month or last year, and they're finding like, oh, this is supposed to be good for me, but I feel like shit, but this is supposed to be good for me, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, man, they start to pro-age. It's like the whole fasting thing. Like I've been there, done that. But it's like, you got to realize what's really happening. Like people love fasting because they want to detox. They want to do autophagy. They want to do cell cleanup. But did you know that you can have just as much autophagy eating 4 to 6 times a day than eating once a day?
Really?
It's just because autophagy is governed by your metabolism.
Okay.
So sometimes
people will fast and sacrifice their metabolic process, and then that is what causes the cell cleanup. It's like you starve yourself so that your body is like, I'm in a state of survival. I need to eat the damaged cells and and that kind of sounds cool. But the thing is that if your body, you have to jeopardize your metabolism to do that. So what if you just had a healthy, robust metabolism, and then in a high energy state, which is a good metabolic function, in a high energy state, your body is alert, aware, and it just takes care of what it needs to do. And if it needs to recycle or dispose of damaged cells or detox, it'll do that because it's alert. But it's in a state of rest while it's doing it. It's a complete different story. So I had to discover that. It's like, no, I need to figure out how to establish my health in rest, not in stress, because the stress is not sustainable and it's pro-aging. So how do we do that? And the marker is a child. So like, I know that when I have a baby, I'll be able to see health. Obviously, new life, they have warm hands. Typically, they're warm to the touch. They have a robust pulse. They're in awe and wonder, curiosity, imagination, right? They're in a brainwave state that's more conducive to the unseen, so to speak, tapping into the other dimension.
The brainwave states, yeah.
Trauma takes us out of that, right? A lot of times. And so now a kid is the mark. It's like we look at a kid. It's like you cannot enter into the kingdom unless you be like a child. Okay, what is a child? What do they exhibit? Awe, wonder, not just awe and wonder though, warmth, their body temperature. Their body temperature is typically going to be around that good range, 98.6 or whatever. And that's the temperature. The warmth is the essence of life, and it's that temperature that makes the body, like it sets the body aright, you know? And so, and the pulse, like it's robust energy. And their regenerative capabilities are bar none. Like everyone's trying to take care and optimize. Basically, they're trying to obtain the regenerative capabilities they had as a child, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. I know some children were born into some interesting circumstances, but even I had a very traumatic, like kind of birth and upbringing, but the resilience I had even despite it was crazy because my regenerative capabilities were super high as a child, right? So yeah, we're kind of getting into some different territory here.
No, that's awesome. So you're saying pay attention to the underlying principle when you do things. So for example, fasting or eating, whether it's losing weight or autophagy, just be aware of how it's affecting your metabolism, regardless of what you're doing, because that's the underlying principle that everything kind of stems from in that area. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're drowning in a sea of information, and I'm so glad we're in the information age and we have access to such incredible intel, but we'll just kind of take an influencer by their word, right? But we're not always checking in with our body and how it's responding to that word. So I think it's really important that we decide to tap into our personal genius and see how we feel and really get in touch with our soul, our mind, and our body and our spirit. Like just get in touch with who we are. And that will really help us cultivate the greatest level of health and in a sense, mastery or sovereignty or whatever you want to call it, you know?
Yeah.
Maturity.
Yeah, that's awesome. Something that you started moving into that I'd love you to kind of expand because of who you are as a person, and it is such a unique expression, is marrying the physical and the health and the physiology and also the mystical and the spiritual, right? How in the world do you connect those two? How do you, there's obviously correlations that I'm starting to see from what you're sharing, the brainwave states and the experience of the unseen. What was your journey and where you at in using your body and physiology that God gave you to understand and grow in that way?
Yeah. I think it obviously helps that, I had some of my foundational education was in anatomy and physiology. Like that, I love that. Like I wouldn't do so well in other subjects, but man, when it came to the body, I was super intrigued and really wanted to go deep. And then later I would obviously have a spiritual awakening and read through the scriptures in the Bible, and I would just see all these connections. Like we've already talked about gratitude, and we already talked about authenticity and all of that stuff. But I would see that, and I'd be like, wow, when you are grateful, you connect with that 10th cranial nerve in your brainstem called the vagus nerve, and that nerve is actually toned through gratitude. It's obviously influenced and greatly leveraged or connected in the lengthening of the breath and the inhale and the exhale. That's the parasympathetic state. That's that rest and relax state. Like we want to be able to touch that and connect with that and live in a sense in that, live in a space of rest, right? Rest and clarity and energy. And so I saw those connections, and then I really began to understand that like the interconnectivity of mysticism and metabolism, right? So metabolism, energy, the function of the thyroid gland, all of it, it's like, man, does it connect with perception? See and perceive and hear and understand. And I go, oh, wow. Like according to your metabolism is your ability to perceive. The perceptual window can be closed or open based upon obviously how you're energized, your energy state. We know that. It's like, okay, that makes sense because, okay, the energy of our body does connect with our clarity. Where does clarity kind of come from in the cognitive realm? Well, it also comes from just practically your metabolic body, your thyroid gland. And so I'm like, wow, okay, so you can better hack time. You can get more out of said second or minute if your metabolism is functioning better. Because we know by the rate of living theory, the foundation of anti-aging, that they're looking at anti-aging or quantity of days or length of life from a place of hibernation, from a place of metabolic downregulation. Like, how long can you live? And then the theory is okay, we need to slow down your energy and elongate your days. But I believe that if we can increase the energy, right, that's going to be the better route. Now, hibernation or slowing down the metabolic process can kind of dull the mind. Obviously, we know that when we're in a low energy state, we feel like dull. Yeah. So you can connect that. So that if you're in a higher energy state and that's fueled by nourishing your body and therapeutically dealing with yourself, whether that's your breath, whether that's the food you eat, whether that's righteous medications or supplementation, whether that's by genuine connection and love in your life and novelty in your life and getting in nature and all these things like that, these things, they play a huge role in your mysticism. It's like one thing is like, and it's funny because there's so many audiences out there, and I think we've come to grips with the fact that we're mystical by nature. So it's not necessarily like something that we have the option of developing. It's just who we are by our very nature. And so it's like all of it's connected. We've never been disconnected. Okay. So we're just realizing how it's all seamlessly interlinked now, better right now in this epoch, in this era of time. We have everyone from every walk of life, every belief system. Everyone's saying everything, like this is all important. The body's important, the soul is important, the spirit's important, nature's important, the food we eat is important. Like thankfully now there's like this awakening happening, and people are starting to like realize like, no, we need to get more connected to nature. We need to get more connected to creation. And where is that going to take us? It's going to take us to the author and originator of all. And we see some of the most popular figures right now in the world. They're all finding maybe that their origin is Christ. Maybe their origin is God. Yeah, maybe Jesus really did have something that was more valuable than a reformer would. Yeah. Maybe he had something that only God could inspire. Yeah. Maybe he is the only begotten son, right? And maybe if we believe in him, maybe that's the key to living a holistic life. Maybe that's the key to be able to manage and actually go through the crucible of suffering and make it out better. You know, I think that we're finding that out, and it's becoming more evident. And I feel like what I've been able to do and just see the interconnectivity of it all. It's something that we all are doing. We just maybe aren't aware of it.
Mhm.
And I think society and civilization is becoming more aware of it all. For instance, it's like people are dying, right? Like wars are happening. I feel like people are starting to realize, like, we're one person. Not as much as maybe we'd like, but I think people are starting to understand, wow, like we can't disconnect ourselves, right? And like even with, and then that's human life, and with animal life, I think people are starting to realize, like, wow, the food I eat, where does it come from? Right? I see the polar opposite of this, but I also see like a revolution, right? In a sense, like people are wanting to get more connected.
So what's a practical way if I am starting from scratch, from ground zero, of learning about my body and how to learn to leverage the way God created it to start to experience these realities of the spirit,
Mhm.
to experience God's presence? Like, what do I have to do to start experiencing those more?
It's all about awareness. Yeah. That's also what brings the rest, right? And so it's like about awareness. I can talk about every single, and I talked about a few, but it can talk about so many different methodologies or things you can do, right? But just taking your shoes off and stepping on your lawn, or stepping on that ocean, like we're, Australia, close to the ocean, stepping on that beach and just taking a deep breath, like that might be the ticket for your transformation right there. Like, you know what I mean? That is probably one of the better starting places, right? Is like literally just awareness that everything is connected, right? That when you put your feet upon the earth, there God is. It says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. So wherever you're at in your relationship with God, just understand that he's the one who supports your frame. And you can literally just connect to the earth and connect with God. And if you just connect with your breath, take a deep breath in and take a deep breath out, you can pretty much get the work done. Right? But does that seem like it's out of your reach? Does it seem like that's going to take a lot out of you to do? No, I think it's pretty accessible. It's pretty seamless. And I think that you can do that. And I think right there, you'll find your next steps. Just open up your heart, your mind, and ask God to direct you on your path. I think it says, acknowledge God in all of your ways and he will direct your steps. It's like, okay, like I want to live fully connected with God and fully connected with my life's purpose. I want to live fully connected with the fullness of my energy and potential. It's like if you set that intention and you get all of heaven on your side, which means like literally just heaven, partially the celestial bodies. One of the reasons we're so, our body requires connection with creation to be charged. It's like a battery. It's like it charges us for sure. Like there's obviously mystical landscapes here that are higher, lower, wider, deeper. What I'm saying is just like practically, you can just do what I just said and it can take you on a journey of connection. Maybe what it'll do next is it'll cause you to eat differently. Maybe it'll cause you to get more connected to the food you are eating. Like my wife and I, we have a small farm. And this, what I'm telling you right now, this just like getting more connected with creation, with our creator, caused us to think about the food we were eating a little bit more deeply. Like, oh wow, I wonder where this meat comes from. I wonder where this fruit, these vegetables come from. Did they have a good life? Because plants and animals are both living. Were these plants hurt by pesticides? Did they cry out because of the pain of that? Did these animals, did they live a humane life where they fed the right diet? You know, what was happening in their life? And so it caused our heart to kind of break for the animal kingdom, but then it also caused us to like, okay, what can we do? Okay, go to the farmer's market. Or hey, maybe when you go get your beef, check out a local farm, right? Maybe support them because they're the ones who are supporting the food system in the land. They're actually the one, if we talk about the mystical nature of answering the groan of creation, a lot of people talk about, yeah, like it's all in the soul. It's metaphysical. It's all. But if we look at practically what does it look like right now, it looks like restoring the topsoil of the earth. It can look like right now, the greatest people who are governing creation, the greatest stewards of creation right now are the farmers who are doing it right. The farmers who are doing regenerative agriculture. They're the greatest, right? For them, they're the greatest. Like, there's this one guy, I know he's up in Washington. He's like back to Eden gardening, and like when they go to test his soil, it's like the soil is from ancient times. The minerals it has is crazy, right? So I'm just saying, the earth is crying out. Our bodies are crying out, right? And so you can get more connected to your food. That could be the next step after you put your feet on the ground and ask God to connect you, you know, with your purpose, with him, with your full potential. Because food is very spiritual. Like I've been emphasizing that a lot lately. Food is so spiritual. It's a marker of spiritual maturity. I'm not saying don't go have that donut, don't have fun, whatever it is. Like take advantage of
because sugar
good
is
things.
good, right?
What?
Because sugar is good.
Sugar is good. Like if you have a donut that my wife makes, like it's a superfood. It's fried in tallow. It keeps its molecular structure. It's got real sweetness. The what is it called? The flour hasn't seen pesticides. It's good stuff. But hey, listen, if you're out and about, like we've been here in Australia, like I've had meals that are questionable, whatever. But I spend a majority of my life eating things that I know, like I understand how many ingredients are in it because I made it or whatever, you know, that's kind of how we live. And it's actually liberating. It's actually freeing. It's not constricting, because what happens is that your energy body begins to get more liberated. You begin to find newfound clarity. You begin to stop irritating your intestine. And when you irritate your intestine, you can't think clearly. We all know that.
Yeah.
So you see, that could change it. And then you might want to get connected to your breath. You're doing it all the time. You see how it can kind of, I don't want to cause people overwhelm, like on their journey. I want people to find it all and rest. And so I'm kind of right now, I'm plotting a course for people to walk in this by rest. So we eat all the time. That's spiritual maturity by getting connected to our food. All right. We have to learn from some of the ancients. We have to learn from some of the indigenous. We have to see the life laid down. Every time we eat a meal, it's life laid down for us to have life, you know? And then the greatest example of that is in Jesus Christ. He laid down his life in order that we may have life. And every meal that we eat, whether it's a plant or an animal, had to lay down its life in order that we would have life. And so every meal is like, whoa, I'm grateful. That's gratitude. That's like taking thankfulness or being thankful for your meal to the next level. Connection. I mean, connection with creation, yeah, we already talked about that. But connection, like, do we have meaningful relationships in our lives? Meaningful relationships are obviously, it's like the greatest healing agent. So when we're talking about taking care of our health, it's like, do we have meaningful relationships? Right? We kind of want to strive to optimize or enhance our ability to communicate with one another. Like, oh, I'm married. I've got a wife. One of the best things I can do is figure out how we can communicate better, right? And then it's the same with same with people. It's like your friends and your family. It's like, man, how can we communicate better? And I think that will be, one of the greatest things you could do for your health. So we got God, we got creation, we got your food that you're doing all the time, we got your breath, we've got your neighbor, your spouse, whatever it is, like enhanced connection. Find ways you can step into states of awe and wonder. Like for me, I've like practiced this and cultivated this. So like if I look at the ocean, and I think a lot of people can attest to this, I'm like, whoa. There's so many places we're here in Australia. There's so many places where I live in Northern California. Like right now it's like 90 degrees, like Fahrenheit. It's like almost, but there's snow-capped mountains. And to me, like whenever I drive and I see that, I'm like, this is wild. Okay. Backtracking, I spent 3.5 years bedridden. I spent another 3 years, going through sickness, and I spent another 3 years after that. And I spent quite of my life going through issues. There was a time where I was bedridden, and going outside, I would have reactions. I would be almost allergic to the wind. All right. And so it's in those states, it's really hard. And some of you listening may be going through that. Okay. If you're listening to me and you have topical steroid withdrawal, you have severe skin disease, or you're hopeless and depressed, if you have alopecia, or you're going through a mental condition, or you're going through whatever suffering you're going through, it's like, yeah, it's difficult, right? And I think in that place, just be real. I think being real about your circumstance with yourself, like be real with yourself. Don't tell yourself a lie about what you're going through. That conversation is going to be extremely therapeutic. And do it in safety. You're in Christ, right? Only believe, right? So only believe. Like Jesus, he's there. So only believe. Connect with God. Receive the Holy Spirit. Like he's the comforter. He is the great counselor, the Spirit of God. Jesus Christ gave his life in order that you would have life and life more abundantly. So God, he's your creator. He's everything. So give your life to him. And most people who are listening to this, they know me. They walk with God. Surrender into that. Fall into that space of rest within your union with God more. Let go. Become more aware of how connected you are. Connect with your breath. Right?
It's good.
Just, yeah, you know what I mean? Like I've already laid out a template. I basically have no words for a lot of you who are going through pain because I really didn't know, right? Some people will try to give you like all types of things to do and to get. And I'm just trying to say it's going to be okay. Find the real you in it. Find safe places and people you can connect with. Connect with your breath. Maybe that's the easiest thing you can do, right? Maybe that's the first step. It's just like, wow, this breath, I've got this breath and I can breathe deeper. I can take a deeper inhale through my nose and I can exhale through my nose. And as I'm doing this, I can find a deeper state of rest. Do you know that breath is the Ruach? It's the breath of life. That breath connects every single person on this planet. That breath comes from God. And everyone right now is sharing breath. So just through that act of breathing, you're connecting. You're connecting with God, but you're connecting with one another. So realize and become aware of that connection. If you feel alone, just become aware of that connection. And let that energize you. Let that give you newfound strength. Let that bring healing into your life. Move and see if you can move forward, right? And then find rest in the motion. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Arun. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Learning from you and yeah, really diving deep into your story and understanding what you had to go through. I think my biggest takeaways is connect and build relationship with people, with God, with your body, with nature, and through connection, through that relationship with that, authenticity will come out and you can be empowered to express yourself instead of trying to pretend or copy It's like we need authenticity, and thank you for being authentic and vulnerable with your story. It's a great, it's scary. It takes lots of courage, but it's also been such a resource, and I hope it becomes a resource for everybody else as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right on.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's been great.